Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Journey to Happy podcast. I'm Olga, your host, and today I have a guest. You guys, I've been having a lot of guests lately in the podcast for a great reason. I am privy to other coaches in my own coaching group right now, and I am having a blast asking people to come and share their genius with all of us. So I hope you've been enjoying this. I am so honored that they're saying yes to my invitations. And today I have an amazing human across the screen. Where are you, Jeanine? We're in
I'm
in
in
the world.
Southern California.
There, I'm a little jealous. So it's nice and warm.
It
Um,
is.
you guys don't have fall, do you?
We do not.
Well, it's very fall weather today here in Canada. And so, yeah, it looks like bright and shiny on your end. Um, Jeanine, I don't know how to pronounce your name, so I'll let you do that in a moment. But why Jeanine is here, and how I know you're a beautiful human, by the way, is because that's my gift. I connect to humans and I can see through. And every time you speak at our group coaching, explaining your work, I'm like, pure heart. You are just love and heart. I know that you love your job. And any human out there who's struggling parenting their teenage needs to have some of your magic in their life. So
Oh,
that's why you're here. I just thought it would be a gift for my audience to hear you and your thoughts. And I just love that you're all about connecting and understanding and really getting parents over that hurdle of the teen years that seem to be so dramatic and tragic for some of us. And they don't need to be this way. And that's what you give to people. It's another perspective on parenting. And every time you read anything, I was telling you earlier, like, are you describing my 3-year-old? Who I think could be, I call him a teenager because he's three in some ways and in other ones. Well, I suppose teenagers act like 3 years old at times. That might be the problem. I don't know.
100%.
But
So
anytime you speak, I'm like taking notes because although he's not a teenager, I'm like, I can use this. I also have a morning rush routine. How do we problem solve? So I'm going to let you guys know that Jeanine is a coach for parents who want a better relationship with their teens. And even if you're not a parent listening, I want you to stay connected and listen to this episode because I promise you, you're going to find a tip or two that you can use in a relationship that's going to help you connect and be understanding and show up in a very loving way. So, welcome to the show, Jeanine. I'm so happy that you're here. Please introduce yourself and say your name the right way because I was going to totally butcher that.
yeah, well, thanks for having me, Olga. I'm Jeanine Mouchawar. And like you said, I am a life coach for parents of teenagers. And you're absolutely right. Most of what I lead with in coaching is learning communication skills. And so, although my passion is to help parents of teenagers, a lot of this are just communication skills that we never learned in college or high school or growing up. And it really can apply to anyone in any kind of relationship, to your point.
Mm-hmm. So, what brought you to this work? I'm assuming you're a mom.
Yes.
Yeah.
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 Yeah. I am a mom to 3 kids who are actually now young adults. And what brought me to the work was really them. With, a little background, I've got Julia, who's my oldest. She's 25. And when she was a teenager, she just was this overachiever, loved school, wanted to get straight A's, but consequently, it was challenging trying to help her manage her overwhelm, her anxiety, the pressure that she put on herself. And I found that I wasn't quite sure how to help her with that. And she also sort of came up right when all the social media was booming. So it was so new and something I'd never experienced, certainly had no idea how to parent. How do you navigate helping, especially a girl, seeing her friends posting things and about with their body, so body image, or all of a sudden knowing exactly where everyone is at every time of the day and whether you got invited to join them or not. So it's all these challenges that, I had never been exposed to with Julia. Jack's a really different kid. He's 24 right now, and he was diagnosed with ADHD at a young age and a learning disability. And a common character trait that goes with that, for those in your audience who have a child with ADHD, this might sound familiar. It's black and white thinking, perseverating on one specific issue and really difficult to move them off that issue. Not taking responsibility, blaming others, that does often go with that, or at least it did with my son. And so just trying to navigate and help him figure out how to take responsibility for things, not to lie about things, not to get defensive, and get into just communicating with him required very different skills than with my daughter. And then
my head is going yes, hard, because I married an ADHD human. And I'm yeah, all of the above.
Yeah. Most of us have some experience. Either we have it or we know someone who has.
Yeah, of course. And I have a lot of clients who are self-diagnosed ADHD that they would tell me, I'm pretty sure I am. And I'm I would side with you. That sounds just about right. And I would say, just to add to what you were saying, I think of myself as a great communicator. It's part of what I do for work. It's always been what I do. It's an easy skill. I was born good communicator. And there are times with my husband when I'm not a good communicator, because it takes a different skill of communication that doesn't necessarily work in other places. So yeah, I can see how that was challenging. I'm just siding with you. I feel it.
Yeah, no, exactly. Spot on. We've gone through something similar. It sounds like
we've survived something similar.
Yeah, or still working on it, right?
Yeah. I'm still married.
I felt like I was a pretty good communicator too, but when you have somebody who sees the world a little differently and communicates differently, it's our challenge to kind of meet them where they're at so you can have that connection. Mm-hmm. And just to wrap up on my kids, my last one's Nate. He's 20. He's a junior at SMU. But in high school, there were a couple challenges parenting him. He was super into video games. I thought that meant he was really lazy. So there was a lot of friction around that and trying to motivate him. And also super challenging just being the younger brother of a child with ADHD and trying to help him through that. So I think just in general, Olga, I had always just parented intuitively, and it worked pretty well. But when all these challenges started coming in when they hit high school, all of a sudden, our smooth, joyful, carefree relationship turned into a lot of tension and conflict and frustration for me. And I just thought that, I noticed my kids pulling away and disconnecting. And I just thought that there's got to be a better way.
So your resume or your RV, whatever you guys call, what do you guys call it?
Yeah, resume or CV.
Resume as well. CV, thank you. RV, what am I talking about? Your CV, your introduction to anybody you're working with is that personal experience you've had of 3 very different children, right? That demanded something different of you. And because I see you on this other side where you're teaching parents or you're coaching parents to connect. I'm questioning myself, how did you make that bridge right now? Because I can totally side with your frustration and feeling right now, I've always said, such a patient mom. I've intentionally wanted to be a patient mom because my dad lacks patience. And I'm I'm going to be patient. I'm choosing to be a patient mom. And I was A+ing in my own evaluation. I'm look at me. Till my son turned into a teenager. I'm oh no, it's not that I've been patient. It's just that I've been having a really easy relationship with him where I haven't been required to be patient. Now I can see like, oh, I need to make some adjustments. I actually need to go for a break. I need to take, a moment. I need to watch what I'm saying and think about what I'm saying. And so I'm beginning to adjust and notice that as he develops and he's becoming his own person, and I have thoughts about who he is or what he's doing and whatnot, that I have to readjust to that. So my thinking, and I don't know if the audience like feels this way, is how did you make it from being in that place of frustration to thinking there's got to be another way?
Yeah.
And that other way didn't become, let's change them and modify these kids to become the model that they need to be. But almost like you took a completely different approach of just looking within yourself, right? I'm guessing, this is my guess, because of what you do for work. And then just 100%. Making the changes internally.
Yeah, I think it came to a point where I noticed everything I was doing, which I think comes just intuitively and naturally to most of us. Like, you need to do this, you should do this, you're giving your child advice, you're fixing problems for them, you're giving them life lessons. Like, I think all of that just comes intuitively to most of us especially when we see behavior that is alarming or we don't like. But what I realized was, by doing all of that, it was having the exact opposite impact that I wanted. Instead, felt like my kids weren't listening to me. It felt like they were pulling away and getting defensive instead of connecting with me. And so I did go to, there was an event with one of my kids where he was actually asked to leave school senior year. And I thought, okay, it was a wake-up call for me. Like, okay, this isn't working. And what can I do to fix the situation? So I found a parenting program that I actually went to with my son, and it just dramatically changed our relationship. It taught him new tools on how to communicate, but more importantly, me. It taught me new tools on how to communicate with him that I had never learned or been exposed to before. And I remember thinking, like, this is crazy. Why are we learning geometry and economics and all these other subjects when we're humans communicating with other humans, and we're not taught some of these really powerful communication tools and skills that just can completely impact your relationship? So although I went initially to help my relationship with one of my sons, it ended up impacting my relationship with my kids and my husband as well. And I think just witnessing that transformation for me and my own family and my relationship, I just thought, I want to get this information into the hands and into as many parents' hands as possible. Everyone should know this information. And so when I went trying to figure out, okay, well, how do I deliver this? I came upon coaching. And when I pursued that and got a certification in coaching, it was so interesting, Olga, because so many skills that we learn in coaching and to get certified were aligned with the skills I was taught in this parenting program. So it just became this beautiful, integration of taking my life experience with my 3 very different teenagers, combined with the skills I learned, and then the coaching certification, and it just all really integrated so beautifully together. And it's like, now I'm a parenting coach for parents.
I love it. And I think you have like this groundedness within you that could be so reassuring to somebody who's struggling. Like I am very emotional. And so you were saying before we started recording, Jeanine was like, I know you very well. Tell me more about you. I'm like, I'll tell you everything once the recording starts, because I want people to hear this. I'm an open book. But I am very emotional, and becoming a mom has made me even more emotional. I just cherish every moment. I work very hard for that title of motherhood, and like I enjoy it, and it's a joy. And one of the thoughts that as you were talking, that I have is like, for me, and I don't know if this happened to you, I have every milestone my son has, I celebrate. but it also aches a bit in my heart because I'm like, the breakup is inevitable. One day he's going to move out, he's going to need me less. And that makes me both grateful that's the goal to get independent children, but also sad. And when you mentioned that you notice your children pulling away, I can imagine that creating an energy of fear and sadness for the parent. And most of us, when we're in fear and in sadness, we act with anger because we can't put like the two things to that what we're actually is afraid of losing this child, that we're sad, that we're disconnecting from our children, and we jump into anger. So how do like, and so I imagine if there is also a teenage just poking you, that anger, that frustration can be like the normal
Mhm.
what we normalize even in parenting, to be like, well, of course you have teenagers, you're going to be yelling at them and just disconnect is what to expect. But I love that you are seeing that there is another way and teaching people that there is another way. So how do we people go from that place of frustration
Mhm.
and sadness, because I do want to honor that sadness. Like I said, I started feeling it from my son going to daycare, and I kept him home for 2 years. I was
Yeah.
like, okay,
Yeah.
now he can talk and tell me what happened at school, so I can send him to school.
Uh-huh.
And just it was a grief. I'm like, oh my God, one day he's not gonna need me at all.
Uh-huh.
Um, and so I can imagine if I had a teenager who's into video games or social media or just to himself, not talking or sharing the way I would want him to, that I might end up in frustration, just acting in anger and just less patience and less connection. How do we
Mhm.
get somebody who's feeling that they can't have a need, that they feel like they might need to fix their child or something's wrong with their kids? They're like, I used to do therapy and I used to love when the parents brought me the kid and I'm like, actually, I'd rather work with you, the mom or the dad. You have the problem. That kid's behavior will be solved the moment you and I do some work. So
I-
how do we talk to these people right at this moment? The parent who's listening to us and thinking like, yeah, man, I'm frustrated and I act in anger and I'm
Yeah.
disconnecting and that hurts, but it's also, I feel like I have to be so strict with this kid and like fix them.
Oh, you bring up so many great points. I think the first thing to recognize is, what you touched on, that, and we love, in our industry to say two things can be true at the same time, right? And that's parenting is hard and it can be joyful at the same time,
Mhm.
right? So just kind of recognizing that first and foremost, yeah, it's difficult being a parent, it's challenging being a parent, and you're not alone in that. There's nothing wrong with you, there's nothing wrong with your kids. It's just part of life, and not feeling like guilty when sometimes you feel like this is just too hard. And, but also honoring the times that you are having fun and it is being joyful. But, in regard to seeing alarming behavior as a teenager, I think your point of it's natural for us as parents to get really scared and get fearful when we see things, like they're smoking or they're drinking or they're coming home after curfew or they're hanging out with people that you think aren't good influences on them. And it's just natural for us to get really scared and fearful. And then what typically happens is we just instinctually want to try to control the situation. Right? Because when we feel like if we could just get control over this, it would make my fear and worries dissipate.
Because you feel like you're doing something about it, you're controlling the outcome.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. But as as we know, we can't literally control our teenagers' behavior as much as we might want to. But as we, do things where it might start benignly with trying to, say, hey, you need to do this or you should do this. Or, as you try to offer advice and those things don't work, we naturally start to create more rules, more restrictions, and then often that leads to punishments because we think, oh,
Consequences, right? Like, yes.
Consequences, right? Punitive consequences, because we think that will change the behavior. And that's because that was kind of the culture we grew up in.
Which is
So
fear-based. Like,
it
I've noticed
is
it now with my 3-year-old. I want to tell him the risk attached to everything that I don't want him to do so that he's afraid and he doesn't do it. It's so freaking ingrained in our brains to parent fear-based.
exactly. Yeah, because we're humans and right, we get scared. We want the best for our children. We want to keep them safe, just like I'm sure you want to keep Mateo safe. But, sometimes that results in taking actions from a place of fear. And I think even more common with teenagers, like you were saying, it tends to be often a place from anger and frustration or annoyance. And so what we want to do is just to kind of recognize that and then think about, okay, so what's like the most effective way I can help my teen make better choices? And those are the type of skills that we work on. And,
I love that because you're empowering them to decide. You're just sort of providing them with all the information they might need to then decide for themselves. And like,
because as a teenager, I was different than a 3-year-old. As a teenager, they think they know what's best for them.
Of course, yeah.
They think you know nothing and that you don't get it. And so it kind of leaves you in a position of, okay, wait, if I come in with my advice, they're not going to listen. So I got to come at this with a different approach, a different way to communicate with them. Because if my ultimate goal is to help them make a better choice, because the choices I'm seeing before my eyes are alarming, and what I'm doing isn't working, I've got to try something different. So, and one of the first things that I teach my clients is actually what you brought up, which is, when we're feeling these big emotions of anger or frustration or sadness or annoyance or fear, it's typically because whatever our teen has done has triggered that. And so the very first thing we need to do before we engage in a conversation is to calm our emotions down. And that's like the first foundational step that I teach every client. And that's hard. That's super hard.
Oh yeah, we're masters of avoidance, right? We want to avoid feeling feelings.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know, I'm sure this happened to you. I remember taking my son as a 1-year-old to our children's hospital because he had like a respiratory infection. I don't know, but I'm a new mom. I'm like, this is terrifying. Yeah. So I'm going to take him to the hospital. And I'm not shy to admit that I'm looking at this cute little baby that I brought to the hospital while I'm extremely anxious and worried about him. Because in my new mom brain, this is really bad. And all I could think about is like, why do I have to love you so much? If I loved you less, this would be so terrifying.
Yeah, I love that.
For a split second, I was like, why did I become a mother? Now my heart is going to be exposed to all the things and you're so out of my body and out of my control. And holy shit, this is scary. This is real, really terrifying. And you're only one. I still control where you go, what you eat. So, and I think our brains don't have a time to catch up to the reality that it is the most vulnerable that will ever be is having these children that we love so deeply that it hurts. We love them so much, it hurts.
Oh, that's so true. That's so true. And I think also just, hearing like you go through that with Mateo, I think another place that parents of teens really get stuck is that for so long, for so many years, your child was very curious and it's your job to protect them and to provide knowledge, right? So as they're asking you questions, like I remember my youngest, we used to call it Deep Thoughts by Jeanine Mouchawar, right? Because at 3, 4 years old, I'd be taking him to preschool and he'd be in, his car seat in the back of the car, like, Mommy, how are babies made? Right? Or Mommy, what happens when you die? Like these big, like
philosophical,
deep, right? Yes. But it was so rewarding for me because I got to provide my expert knowledge, my expertise, right? And he was joyful and happy. And so my brain got wired to respond with advice, respond with knowledge, because I was getting this great feedback. Right. Or if you look at, Mateo's trying to learn how to tie his shoes. Right. And so you're there helping him, like, this is how you tie your shoes. This is how you do things. Right. He's relying on you, and you get to provide your expert skill. Or, oh, no, you need to cross the laces this way. You should cross them that way. Right. And then all of a sudden his laces are tight and he's excited. Maybe that happens closer to 5, not 3. I'm trying to remember.
Not yet.
The point is like, it's our job to help them and to do things for them and to provide knowledge, and we get this positive reinforcement.
Yeah, they like it. Initially, they really love this, right? And we're like, I'm doing a good job. He's happy.
Yes. And so as we get that positive reinforcement, we build these habits. Right. And so we just naturally keep doing what worked for so long. We just naturally keep doing that with teenagers. But unfortunately, that's not what they need anymore. Right? What it's time for you to get curious and for them to come up with their own wisdom. It's time to flip that. And that's super hard. It's really hard because we've got these habits ingrained in us of how to communicate with them. But what they need now is so different.
I love that.
Yeah, that's where I see a lot of parents get stuck naturally.
Yeah. The rules are changed and we're playing the same game. And we're like, hold on, I'm still parenting you. So you should be asking me, and I'm advising you, and I'm protecting you, and I'm making all decisions for you.
Yes, exactly. Because that's what we did for so long.
And it worked. And we raised great children. Now we got to trust, sit on the sidelines and trust that our work is going to pay off.
Yeah, which is hard. Like, we're not used to doing that. We don't have that skill developed yet.
Oh my God, I'm going to start developing that right now. Okay, so here's the thing. My clients, what I've noticed, some of my clients are in their 50s and late 40s, and I don't know how other ages, but they might have children who are no longer teenagers, okay? But that they never made this switch, that they never actually did this thing that you're so wisely advising us to do. So they have created some sort of relationship with their now grown adults, could be your ages, where they feel that they need mom or dad to fix their problems, or they might not feel that sense of independence, especially kids that have maybe a diagnosis of anxiety or ADHD or something, where as a parent, we feel that we got to be more involved because like they have quote unquote special needs or they need more from us. And it's true, they might need more from us. But at some point we didn't make that switch where we let them, even though, or in spite of their story, that we can still stand on the sidelines and just, so my clients are fixers. They're chronic fixers. They just love fixing all things. They're so into achieving things and taking things personally, because they think if they take it personally, they really care. And they're so incredibly loving. They will not hesitate to bring both of their hands full into the dirt, all arms in, to help, especially their children. But as they're seeing grown adults, they might be thinking like, crap, maybe I am doing too much. Maybe I haven't shared this power of decision making, of them building their own trust. So what stands on the other side of parents not addressing this in the teen years? So being a motivator for them to start on that work now. And what stands on the other side of having done this work, of being able to pass on sort of like the torch to them and say like, now you're in charge to some degree, because they still need that the parent, especially in the teen years, they need a parent, but they don't need us to be how they needed us throughout prior years. They need a different aspect of ourselves, a different relationship. How to balance that out without jumping into fixing mode or not caring, like not going to the black or white, right? Like not caring at all and just be like, oh, you're free, do whatever you want.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's such a good question. Well, first of all, I totally relate to your audience. I'm a fixer too. And, it's like when you see this child who you love so dearly, regardless of the age, if you feel like, oh, I know how to fix that and help them, I'm going to do it, right? It's like we have the best of intentions. We
Yeah.
love them. We want to help them. But as they get older, they don't want your help most of the time, or if they do, you're blocking them from building their own life skills so they can be like an adult who contributes and can take care of themselves. So the thing is these communication skills like work whether you've got a preteen, a teenager, or even young adults like I have. I'm still practicing and trying to use these skills with my young adults. But I would say the number one thing you can do is really come to them with a sense of curiosity. So instead of leading with your solution, like how you want to fix what you see that they're struggling with, to turn that around and ask them a question. Because in essence, that's actually the key to helping them become thriving, happy adults, is getting them to figure out how to solve their own challenges versus you trying to fix it for them. And the path to that is you're trying to get their brain to do the work, right? When we see a solution and we are like, oh, I know exactly how to fix that problem, that's our parent brain doing the work. But we need to give our kids, or in this circumstance that you brought up, young adults, the opportunity to do that thinking themselves and to problem solve themselves. And we can walk that path with them in the background, kind of as a guide, but we need them to use their own brain to start solving their own challenges so that they can at some point be independent from you and be, and that feels good.
And be confident in themselves, right? Like I think that's what's on the other side of this process of you abstaining yourself from fixing is that they develop confidence. And that, I mean, that's what you guys pay me so much money for, to gain confidence. Imagine if your parents were able to like have parent you in a way that just happened naturally for you.
Yeah. And that's where I see a lot of parents get stuck, is they want their child to be confident, and they think by fixing whatever the problem they see, that then their child will listen, do what they say, and then they'll gain confidence. But that's actually the opposite thing happens, because you're fixing the problem versus your child. So
they're not having to think. They're just being told what to do. So they're followers.
Exactly.
But not developing the skills.
Right. So the more you allow them the space to think through things and develop their own skills, and then they go out and they try it, and maybe like what they try and how they're solving the problem is not the way you would. And maybe it's not optimal and ideal, but they can build on that. Right? They go out, they try what their solution is. They look at it like, okay, what worked? What didn't work? What do I want to do differently? How can I learn from this? And so they continue to build on those skills and make better and better choices. And that's what develops confidence.
Now, I hear this a lot from all of my clients. They say, but how do we know we can trust? Right? I know we can trust their decision making, that they're going to make the right. And that to me seems like the mental lie their brain gives them to then give themselves permission to be controlling again. Like trust equals controlling my brain. If you're using the word trust, I really know what you're saying. How can I control his or her behavior so that I get the outcome I want? Because I'm still in this equation, right? As a parent. So what do you normally tell them? Like, how do they, because really the parent is restraining themselves from fixing, from jumping, from softening their blow or their landing, right? Like I have a 3-year-old, so how many times I like jumped in funny ways to prevent his head from hitting the ground. Like that's what parents do. We have more reflexes than we knew we have
Yeah.
until you're like put to test. You're like, look at me, I can be a ninja and just hold my son's, head with my foot while I'm also holding my warm coffee so that the landing is soft.
Mhm.
So imagine a parent of a teenage who's worried, especially with that worry, because worry feels pressure, urgent to us,
Mhm.
who's done, might be a fixer and a user, fixer and a proactive, like I gotta helper,
Mhm.
and it's constraining from doing that, which might be foreign to them, right? That's the first time that they're like, I'm not gonna jump in, I'm gonna watch my kid, and they're thinking, I've gotta trust
Right.
themselves, the teenager life. What are they trusting? How do they build that?
Yeah. Yeah. I love talking about this topic because, like you said, our brain is going to tell us that I'm going to trust my teenager is going to be okay by telling them what to do and they'll do it. Right. So if I tell them, oh no, your curfew is 12:30, right? And you need to be home by then, like my parent brain is like you were saying, you're trying to control the situation so you can trust they will be okay.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So your brain tells you that, oh, that's the way to get that trust, but it actually backfires and it's the opposite thing that happens. And when you see that with your own eyes and you're like, okay, wait, this isn't working. I'm still not trusting them. I'm still not trusting them to make good choices and good decisions. It's because unfortunately, you just have this urge to solve and fix their problems. And so the actual real pathway to trusting that they're going to be okay, which is what all of us parents want ultimately, is to help them build these good decision-making skills.
Mm.
When you see them making good decisions that you've had zero input on or very little,
Your trust grows.
your trust grows. Like, so all of a sudden you can like exhale, right? And be like,
Yeah.
I don't have to hold my breath. I'm not so terrified. But the pathway to feeling that way and trusting them is to see them making good decisions right in front of your eyes. And so you want to create that communication with them where you're encouraging them to problem solve for themselves, to keep making better and better decisions, which gives them confidence. And then it gives you the confidence that they're going to be okay. And when you have the confidence they're going to be okay, you feel like you can trust them.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. And so my brain is thinking, but because I'm thinking as the mom of a teenage, how if like the brain might want to tell, if you become too trusting, then it's almost like you take your eyes off it, like you're not supervising anymore, you're not helicoptering anymore. So what's going to keep them safe? Like, what if your thought about trust is that it's not the safe thing to do with a teenager?
Oh my gosh. Well, I guess what I notice what happens is we tend to focus on the surface level behavior that we're seeing that's alarming. Okay. And so then we try to solve for that. But really, if you think about it, it's not so much that, like, let's say they're not listening or they're arguing or they're being disrespectful. What you want to explore is why. Why is that going on? Why are they being disrespectful or arguing or dressing inappropriately or smoking or drinking? Like, what's going on there? What's driving that action? What are they thinking? What are they feeling that's causing that behavior? That's the root. That's getting at the root cause of what's going on. And that's really the sweet spot where you can help them. And so when you are trying to address their thoughts and their feelings, and as you create conversations where they are sharing what they're thinking and feeling, that in turn enables you, it decreases your worry and increases your trust they're going to be okay, because you now know why they're doing something that concerns you. And when you know why, it helps lower your worry, right? And raise your trust. And then you can have conversations with them around the why. So like, for example, say your teenager, your daughter comes out and she's dressed inappropriately, right? And you naturally are like, you can't wear that. You got to go back up to your room and change your outfit, right? That's what I mean. Like, we're addressing the surface level behavior, but she's going to be, pissed off. You're telling her what to do. Many teens will just pack whatever they want in their backpack and sneak it behind your back and go change at school, right? All the things you don't want. You're not fixing the problem that she's dressing inappropriately.
Because then it's like a distraction, and we stay in the distraction. This is what they're presenting to us. Yeah. And we're staying out on the surface, like I call those distractions. And then we lose that thing that you said we should have, which is the curiosity to figure out, like, what's behind this dress up scenario? what's happening there? What is my kid feeling?
Right. So that's what we want to get at. Those are the kind of conversations we want to have, because we honestly don't know why she's dressing that way. We think we probably think we know because we're smart and intuitive and we know our kid, but we want to approach them like really having no knowledge, and then getting like curious and start asking, like, so, what's going on? I noticed you're dressed pretty, seductively. What's going on with that? And then start, you'll get more information. Maybe she's trying to, maybe she thinks dressing that way is going to have a boy like her. Maybe she thinks this is just like the current trend and she's trying to be cool with her friends, right? And once you know what's going on in her head and what the motivation is for the behavior, you can have a conversation around that. And that's what influences her to make a better choice.
So what are the top 3 skills that we have to cultivate in parenting? Teenagers, like, I think is the same thing. Like I can see myself, like I could use self-constraint right now in how I say things or how much I do, right? Like how much I believe my 3-year-old can do. He's always surprising me. I'm like, oh, you can do that? Oh, yeah. I thought you couldn't, but I've never had a 3-year-old before. So I have no idea, right? Like he's teaching me what he's capable of. Yeah. And one of the skills I personally try to nourish in parenting is to assume the student, like he's my teacher. He's teaching me things, And I think that keeps me humble and it keeps me curious, because as a student, like we're in this coaching program, I'm curious to learn more. And when I'm in curious mind, I learn more. I'm open to it. But when I feel like the expert, I'm not open to learning. I'm here to just give you and you take, and then, like that's the exchange. So what will be your top 3 recommendation of skills for any parent who's listening to us to begin to work or to explore if they're already like working at it?
Yeah. Okay. I'm going to give you, it's actually 5.
5. Okay.
The first 5 foundational skills that I teach my clients, in order to decrease the tension and increase like more calm, peaceful home. There's 5 things. One we touched on earlier, which is when you see a behavior that you're scared of or is alarming or you don't care for, the first thing you want to do is to calm your emotions. Number 1, right? You don't want to engage in a conversation with them when you're angry, frustrated, worried, annoyed, scared, any of those things, because they will get defensive and they'll shut down or they'll start arguing with you. So the very first thing is to calm your emotions down before you engage in a conversation.
And I would say this is good for any relationship, people. And also, this is what I tell my clients: when your emotions are high, your intelligence is low.
Yes, I
So if you
love
have a
that.
conversation with anybody who might be even a little bit logical and you're in high state of emotion, it's going to become even more frustrating because their logic is going to kick in and it's going to call out how everything you're saying makes no sense. And when you think about it for a moment, you're like, why did I even say that? Like that doesn't make it right. So
Yeah,
I'm the
yeah,
queen
I
of
say
speaking
that.
on high emotions. The Latin in me speaks out before I have a time to like, hold on, let me think about this. My husband calls it spice. I'm like, that's just reacting. So I love this calm your emotions before you engage in that conversation. Like get grounded. Notice what's happening to yourself. Love it.
Yes, and just another way that you reminded me that I talk about it is you want to intentionally respond versus emotionally react.
Yeah.
And that's the whole point of taking the step to calm your emotions down. So
Love
you
it.
can talk to them with intention, with your wise words, right? Versus your emotion, your heated emotion.
Mm-hmm.
So the second thing is once you've calmed your emotions down, the second skill that I teach is to describe what you're seeing. Simply, clearly, one simple sentence, right? Hey, I noticed you're dressed inappropriately.
Mm-hmm.
Or I noticed you got a D on your paper.
So
I
this
noticed there were
description,
SIGs in your backpack, right? So just a simple, clear one sentence observation without your judgment and
I was
tone
going to say,
seeped in, right?
which is the first thing we want to say, like, why are you dressed like that? It goes out our judgment of what they're doing, right? Like
Yes.
oh my God.
Oh, I
I
love
already
that
do
you
this with
said
my
that.
baby. I'm like, you smell like a wet dog. So instead of just saying, I noticed you got dirty, right?
Yeah.
Describing that versus like putting my judgment. You smell like a wet dog. Not that there's something wrong with wet dogs and the smell, but I mean, I'm just becoming aware of that. That's awesome. Love it. Okay, step
Yeah.
3.
Well, that leads me to step 3, which is what like you just said. Like it's just natural for us to be like, why do you smell like that? Right? Or why'd you get the D on the test? Or why are you dressed, so inappropriately? Right? That's just natural. And so in step 3, I teach there are no why questions. We want to understand why, but we don't want to lead the conversation with why. So step 3 is curiosity
Mm-hmm.
by asking a what question, right? You got a D on the test. What's going on there?
Uh-huh. I have the same rule with my clients.
Oh,
I'm like, nobody's allowed to ask why. Your brain goes down the rabbit hole of like giving you the worst answers.
right. Yes. And with
Why am
our
I overthinking? You
teenager,
never get to the why anyways. You become like a 4-year-old. And why? And why? Right? Like you never get to the answer.
yeah, exactly. And with teenagers, if you think about when you ask them a why question, that's usually underlying judgment and tone in it. Like, why'd you do that? Which is just going to shut them down and make them feel defensive, which is the exact opposite thing that we want.
And they might also feel, they might also literally not know.
Absolutely.
I don't know why I dress this way. Like that's, and we might get frustrated with an I don't know. So why do you do it? Why do you do it? Like I had a client whose daughter was doing something inappropriate online. And she's like, we've asked her why so many times and she just doesn't know. And they were like so frustrated that it's like she was holding the why from them. I'm like, it is very possible that she doesn't know why she
Yeah.
follow, maybe a trend that's happening right now. She doesn't need to be clear on the why. Does the why answer the problem? Like, let's get to what now. What's happening? What brought her to that? Okay, love it.
Yes.
Number 4.
Okay, yeah. And so what we need to be doing with number 3, when we ask our what question, is we need to be listening for what are they thinking? What are they feeling? And that's the why. That's the root cause of what's going on. So when they answer us, we then want to validate. That's step 4 is showing we understand how they're feeling or validating their feelings. So for example, if you're like, hey, I noticed you got a D on the test, what happened? And they say something like, oh, well, I just didn't have enough time to study. Right? You might be thinking, oh, it sounds like they're feeling maybe some pressure, some overwhelm. Maybe they went from school to their sport, to their community service, and like they literally had no time to study and they're feeling pressure and overwhelm. So in step 4, you want to show that you understand these big feelings that they're having. Like, hey, yeah, that would make sense that you were feeling overwhelmed if your schedule was so busy that day, right? So
And I love this because we know that the majority of teenagers feel misunderstood.
Yes.
Right? Exactly. Like talking about the disconnect, imagine if they felt seen and understood by you, the parent, what would that do to the trust and the bond that you have with them?
Yes, exactly. Because when they feel seen and understood and listened to, you create connection. And if you want them to change their behavior or cooperate, you need to start with connection.
Absolutely. And that goes for anybody in any relationship.
Absolutely. These are just basic communication skills that work with our partners as well.
Exactly. How do you go on a date? You build that connection. Like you don't just force somebody to behave and then you're going to like me.
Right? Exactly. Yeah. And any human, when we feel like the person across from us understands us and gets us and is listening to us, right? That just like deflates all of our big emotions of maybe embarrassment or humiliation or overwhelm or anxiety or stress, right? It allows us, the person across from you who you're validating, in this case, your teenager, to just, feel like there's nothing wrong with me.
And I think this might be a good time to add, from my perspective, just because you didn't do it this way, just because this wasn't relevant to you in your life when you were their age, because I think that parents, we just project so much. We're like, but I wasn't like that. Why are you like that? Right? Like we want them to be like us in some strange way. That validation of like, they're their own human, and like our own perception or what our experience has been doesn't have to be theirs. And there's nothing wrong with that either. Right? Like for us to let go of like our tendency to want them to live and experience what we have or think like how we would. Like you said, if I wouldn't resolve the problem that way, my tendency is to think that then that's wrong. You're doing this wrong. But there are many ways to just solve one problem. So I love that. So what's step number 5?
And to have that compassion that there are many ways to look at.
Yes, compassion, love it.
And step 5 is really inviting their solution in. Right? His asking them like, what, so, okay, so that didn't, once you validate how they're feeling, with the situation, like, let's say they did poorly on a test, right? And so you've taken the time to connect with them and show them you understand that, of course, it makes sense. You're feeling overwhelmed or pressure, right? Then it gives them a time to sort of be able to have a clear mind. Their emotions have resolved a little bit and they can think clearly on what they want to do differently to create a different result, right? So you're asking them like, well, what do you want to do? Just something basic, like, what do you want to do differently? And, maybe they say, well, gosh, I've just got too much on my plate. I've got to, participate less and do one less sport, or whatever. But the whole point is we want to invite them. Here's what we were talking about earlier. We're inviting them to use their own brain to come up with their solutions.
To evaluate what worked, what didn't, right? What will they do differently?
Exactly.
I love it. One of the interactions I remember so distinctively with my dad growing up was me failing some math test. And I'm an achiever. I like, getting places. And so that was hard on me. I was hard on myself. And I remember my dad consoling me. I'm like, why are you crying? I'm like, I failed my test. And he's like, oh, and how does crying help you do better? I was like, wait, doesn't. He's like, why do you think you failed? And I'm like, well, I had a solution. And he's like, okay, so what are you going to do next time? It was the most loving intervention. So loving, I still remember that I was like, it's true. Crying doesn't solve the problem, but I have the solution. I have more tests to do. Like it wasn't as final as I thought, as I was making it be. But I also didn't need anybody to punish me or consequence me. I was doing that very well myself.
Yeah.
And that intervention just allowed me to come up with my own solution and suddenly feel so calm and grounded.
Well, and what I heard when you were speaking about his words to you, it came from this place of compassion and empathy, which when you feel seen and understood, it enables you to make a better choice.
And although he might have had a thought as to what I needed to do next, he didn't say that.
Right.
Like he let me come to that conclusion. And that's so much more empowering, I feel.
And that's what teenagers want. They don't want you to tell them what to do differently. They want to come up with it themselves. And we just really need to provide the space or create, the conversation to allow them to do that. And I'm not saying like you can't offer your help. Of course you can say, hey, if you need help, I'm here, right? But that's after they've been given the opportunity to think about what they want to do differently. And also you want them to come to you and say, hey, will you help me with this? Or, hey, I'd love your opinion.
Because they want it.
Yes, they're receptive to listening.
Oh, and lastly, I just wanted to say that one of the things I think of waiting for people to ask for help in general versus us just being like, you need my help. Here's how I can help you. Is more productive to you as a helper because then they want it and you're like, I feel used. Like, I'm useful right now. But I think something important to think about as parents is that our child is looking at us as a role model of all things. And if we can step back and think of how we're helping them navigate through their teen years, is how we're modeling for them how to navigate through, difficult life moments that they're going to continue to have. I think I'll be far more enthusiastic about maybe keeping my own boundaries because I want to teach my kid to have boundaries, because I want to teach my kid to come back to his own resources and need less outside reassurance to trust himself. And when I think of it that way, when I think of all of my parenting as a way of like, I'm teaching this kid without teaching him a lesson, so many lessons, right? Like I'm just by my acting is teaching him so much.
Exactly.
Like I'm teaching him how to own up to a mistake by doing it myself. I'm teaching him how to say I'm sorry by doing it myself. And I do that with my 3-year-old, like, I shouldn't have talked to you that way. And he's like, I love you. He says, I'm sorry. When I'm saying I'm sorry, I'm like, no, you say something else. I am saying you have nothing to apologize. I am apologizing. I think we're role modeling for them. So what skills do we want to role model? The fixing ones that they have to carry the weight of the shoulders on, like the weight of the world in their shoulders, or that can be shared. They don't need to be fixing, they can be trusting, right? Like I think there's so much about intentional parenting that can be so incredibly powerful when we think about the legacy we're leaving within our children by doing the work ourselves, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. So good. I mean, I think that's something that that leads me way out in the front with my heart, is that we have this ability to change like our legacy, our generations, how our kids communicate, and it can start with us.
It will. Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Well, Jeanine, thank you so much for sharing your wisdom. I love these 5 steps. We're going to have all of Jeanine's information in our show notes, so you guys can just click and go straight into her website. I know she offers workshops from time to time, and you will be able to benefit from her wisdom. But if you are a parent of a teenager who are currently feeling that disconnect, please don't wait until things are awful and way too painful. It is like waiting for the marriage to be over to go see a couples counselor. Don't do it. Do it now. Even I am a parenting classes. Like I love learning ahead of time so that I cannot be in, like I can be just learning, not even prevention, just learning. Like my child will not be hurt in any possible way neither will I by me being equipped to know myself better, to control myself better, to know how, like, what's happening to me. Something we didn't talk about. We get triggered, our own childhood gets triggered when we become parents. And that's a whole, can of worms that we can open and explore and heal as we're parenting. But it doesn't have to cost us a relationship with our children to do that healing process. So from this coach to all of you, but one coach to another, I definitely think that this is such an important area of life to pay attention to. Our children are the adults of tomorrow, making decisions, parenting other children. And the best gift we can give them is to work on ourselves so that we can show up to them as the most authentic, loving version of ourselves. And I think, Jeanine, you are an amazing coach to help guide parents to doing that. So head over to the show notes. Yeah, no problem.
Thank you for having me. It's really an honor to be here. And I loved just sharing what I'm passionate about and hopefully help some of your audience with some new skills.
Oh, I'm sure they were I was taking notes. So if I was taking notes, I'm sure they were too. Thank you so much, Jeanine. We'll talk to you soon. And you guys, I'll see you next Monday. Bye for now.